You better not be thinking about waiving inspections. I keep hearing people talk about the idea of waiving inspections when they're looking at buying a house, and it's insane. And I came across this post on Reddit where this person was talking through their experiences. I want to share this story with you really quickly so you could see like how insane the idea is to waive inspections. And then I want you to be able to see if this is something that like are you considering, and maybe you want to reconsider if that's something that you're looking at doing. So you can read through the Reddit post in the link in the description, but through this, they saved a projected $30,000 in almost immediate costs. So they talked about they put in their seventh offer on a home, which obviously like this market is tough to navigate through. And so they're saying, hey, we put in our seventh offer on our least favorite house. And then it was finally accepted. I thought it was funny that they even mentioned like we put it in and this is like our least favorite home. This is just the one that worked. But they were still willing to open and expose themselves to these potentially damaging things on a home that they really didn't even like all that much. And so they offered 5% over listing with an as-is inspection contingency. So basically what that means most of the time is that a seller will allow you to actually have an inspection but not request repairs. So you can have it for your own usage, but then not actually have a contingency on it. Okay, and so what they did in here is they did the inspection, and they did end up backing out of the contract. I'm not sure of all the legality of how they exited that contract. We'll talk about that here in a little bit, but the inspection repairs that came back were septic system needed repair. AC was on the verge of failure. Windows needed replaced. A lot of them were damaged. Concerns about main water service line, visible mold in the attic, and 3 times the EPA limit of radon. And so all of this in here was an estimated about $30,000, again, of almost immediate repairs for health and safety to be able to live in this home. Now, likely a lot of these things probably would have got called out on an appraisal as well, depending on how strict that appraisal was, and if they were going, depending on the loan type that they were using. But that $1.7 thousand, so $1,700 in inspection costs to have this done, because they need some, individual inspections for some of these things, save them $30,000 in the long run. And I think that's really important to consider, because when you're going into looking at buying a home and you're saying, yeah, we'll just waive the inspection, that's not a big deal. It's like, no, it's a huge deal. There can be a lot of expenses on the other side that you might not be able to catch. And at the same time, kind of questioning, like, are you prepared to be able to spend, $1,700 in inspections up front before you purchase a home to make sure that it's a good financial decision for you and your family? Because I would much rather spend $1,700 than not and spend $30 on these extra costs as they come up and need repair when I move in, and then all of a sudden they're causing issues for me and my family, especially with things like mold. Not to mention, those are like long-term health costs that if those aren't being addressed now are going to come up as like medical bills in the future, because that's going to be damaging to your body, right? So I know that increasing competition is happening. It's causing people to do whatever they can to get a house, but at what cost? Like, you might be able to say, yeah, we'll waive the inspection just to get the home, but are you getting so caught up in this frenzy of bidding on homes and doing everything you can to win a house that, you're not actually considering what could happen on the back end? Like, what happens if you waive your inspection? Is that really a good decision? Because really, I don't think it is, unless you're really prepared and you understand everything that could go wrong and you're prepared to be able to remedy that if you do purchase a home and there's all this extra cost here at the end. So you might get the house, but can you afford to keep it is the big question, right? There are ongoing maintenance costs with purchasing a home, and an inspection really is going to help you, be a good layer of protection for you of knowing what some of those costs could be in the future, so you can avoid them if you're not prepared to make that kind of financial investment into a home if it has some issues. So here's how inspection contingencies work if you're not familiar with it. So an inspection contingency is a portion of the contract. So when you submit an offer on a home, you submit this contract, a portion of that likely will have an inspection contingency, and contracts are always negotiated. So this can be different in your area or your state. And this is all things that you can negotiate with the seller when you talk with your agent about this. So what it does is allows you to inspect the home before buying it to spot any expensive repairs needed, right? It helps you be able to say like, yeah, we had to pay some money up front for the inspector, but we identified X amount of repairs needed that we need fixed before we're willing to move in. And so for a lot of people, this can kind of kill a deal. They see a house that they really like, but oh, it had this roof issue, and we don't have the cash to be able to handle that issue in the near future, and so we won't be able to move forward on it. So usually what it does is allows the opportunity to get earnest money back and exit a contract legally. Again, in the Reddit story, it's like, I don't know all the details of that. You're welcome to read through comments and everything to explore how they exited that contract legally because they had an as-is inspection contingency. But for a lot of contracts, again, this is negotiated. Contracts are negotiated. They're not just static things. You can't just say like, this is what happens in my city, in my state. Like contracts are negotiated, all right? They might have a template, but you can negotiate all of those items in there if they're not what you want, okay? And so for a lot of contracts, and what's most ideal is being able to have an inspection contingency that says we have a certain period of time to be able to inspect the property and see what repairs are needed. And then if we want to exit the contract because the repairs are too much for us or we can't reach a negotiation on credits for the contract, then we can do so legally and receive our earnest money back. Now, I've also seen some contracts that say the seller can keep the earnest money if you back out because of inspections. I don't think that's in your favor personally. And again, this is all negotiated, okay? So there's kind of 4 steps here. First, the inspection is completed within a time set on the contract. Again, this is all negotiated. So it might say that you as the buyer have 7 days, 14 days, whatever, to be able to inspect and then request repairs as needed that are up to your standards. Then what happens is an inspector comes out and then you would review the inspection. And so you're going to get an inspection report back. Usually an inspection report is going to tell you, I feel like a good inspection report usually almost kind of seems like the sky is falling. When you first look at it, like it should be comprehensive and cover a lot of details about the house. And there's going to be a lot of minor things in there that really aren't too concerning, but there's also some major things that you might need to consider in there as well, right? I worked with a buyer once who they requested like, it was somewhere around 20 to 30 items from an inspection report, and they were all little things that actually didn't matter. It was things like trim around doors and things like that. Those things don't matter. Things that we can go to Home Depot or wherever, and there's small dollar fixes. Those aren't worth like fighting over on a contract, in my opinion. What you're looking for when you're reviewing this inspection are, what are these things that are going to cost us several $1,000s? Are these big things that we really need to be mindful of, that when we purchase this home, those are going to be our costs that we now take on? Are we ready to take those on? That's what you're looking for, these bigger ticket items in here. Step 3 is then renegotiating if needed in accordance with your contract. So if your contract allows that, great. That's what I think you should go with. But being able to renegotiate, and this can happen in several ways. So I've seen sometimes where it's like, hey, we found this repair needed. It's going to cost $3,000. We're requesting a $3,000 credit. So maybe that's as a seller concession, or maybe that's a reduction of the purchase price. So I've seen that happen too, where it's a discount here as well. And then sometimes what happens is the seller will actually just do the repair work. Maybe they hire someone else to do that, and they provide you with an invoice. So there's several ways that this can be negotiated in here if you ask the seller to take on that work and repair things as needed, or give a credit or a discount on the purchase price. And then to verify, you're doing a final walkthrough normally before closing to verify that work was done, and or getting an invoice for the work that was done as well, to make sure that these things all happen before you actually sign to purchase the home. Because if you say, hey, we require these repairs needed, you want to have some way to validate the work that was done before you actually end up purchasing the home. So should you waive inspections. A good inspection is going to highlight the bad, but again, it's not always reason for alarm. A good inspection is going to be thorough, and so when you look at it, it's the inspection report isn't going to come back and be like, this is such a nice house and it's so cozy. It's going to tell you things that are wrong. So like understand that you're going to see things that are wrong with the home. New homes have problems. And a lot of times there's just these little things that are okay. They're just fun little projects, add them to a weekend. Don't fight over these small things. Don't nickel and dime a seller. I don't think that's the best way to move forward with the contract. What you're really looking for, again, are these things that are going to cost, $1,000+ maybe your budget is a little bit bigger. Maybe it's a $5,000 plus items that you're looking for. Also, keep in mind, does your market kind of require it? And I put that in quotes because I hear a lot of people say this, like, yeah, my market requires this, or contracts already have, they don't have an inspection contingency or anything like that. If you're in a competitive market, you might feel like your market requires you to waive an inspection contingency. I'm telling you, it doesn't require you to, all right? That might be the perception, that might be what other people are doing, but it doesn't mean that you have to do that as well. Okay. So just keep that in mind. Just because what other people are doing doesn't mean you have to do it as well. Just because your market's a certain way does not mean that you have to make a bad decision just because other people are doing that same thing. Also considering, do you have the cash? One, to be able to do the inspections as thoroughly as you need to, but then also, do you have the cash to make certain repairs in the future? If you're already really tight on down payment and closing costs, are you prepared to move forward on a home that is going to require significant amount of repairs in the future? So in my opinion, at most, I would suggest if you need any sort of like leverage, maybe waive the repair requests, but not the inspection itself. So I would never suggest to not have an inspection. I think you always need to have an inspection on a home, right? If you're going to purchase something that's several $100,000 that you're going to take the obligation and responsibility for, especially on like a 30-year mortgage, why would you not have an inspection done on that? Okay, I think you still need a contingency, but at most, okay, maybe waive the contingency, waive the repair requests, but you still need to have an inspection, I think, to understand what's going on there. I really do think you need to have a contingency on the repair requests as well, where you can renegotiate as needed or exit the contract and get your earnest money back if you do find things that are in there that are going to be too expensive for you. And what I see a lot of people do as well is they'll put in their contract that they have the opportunity to request repairs above a certain price. So, for instance, we'll request repairs above $5,000. Anything less than that as an individual item, you as the buyer would be responsible for. And so this is your way of telling the seller, like, hey, we're not going to nickel and dime you for all these little things. So that can add a little bit of leverage to the contract. We're only going to request things that we think are really big. And so if the seller knows that, hey, there's not these issues with the home, then that might give them a little bit more comfort of having that inspection contingency in there as well. Okay, so right over here is a video that YouTube said, hey, I think you might be interested in this. So feel free to check that out to learn more about winning the house you love.